Hello, and welcome to another edition of 360 Half Seconds. My name is Kia from 360 Vet Sales, and with me today is 360 Vet Sales CEO Matt Arena. Matt, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well too. Can't complain. For those who haven't seen this before, I'll quickly explain how this works. I'm going to give Matt a series of questions, or in this case today, one question. He's going to have 360 half seconds or 3 minutes to answer my question. And time starts as soon as I'm done asking the question. So, Matt, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, Matt, question today is what are three financial metrics that buyers will always look at when you take your practice to sale? Time starts now.
Okay. So the first one they're going to be looking at is revenue. Um, there's certain metrics that they want to see from a revenue perspective. Like in general, they want your revenue to at least be 1.2, 1.4 million range or higher. But they're also looking at revenue. And part of the reason when we go to market, we ask for several years of financial statements is because they're looking at your revenue and wanting to see that it's growing.
Mhm.
You don't want to go to market necessarily if your revenue's in decline mode or flat. You want to see that there's an opportunity for the revenue to go up. And there's a couple different ways your revenue obviously can increase, and we'll kind of dive into that. One way obviously is your price increasing. So a lot of practices will do annual or quarterly or semi-annually price increases. But it's also, volume. Well, how much production you're doing, if you will. So um, that's revenue. So answer number one, revenue. Number two, I think number two would be adjusted EBITDA, really important. Your valuation is based on, in large part based on your adjusted EBITDA. Being that we're, a broker and I have a background in accounting, that's where the bread and butter of your valuation is in your adjusted EBITDA, where we're going through and we're finding one-time expenses, add backs, personal expenses, things that we can do to gross up that adjusted EBITDA number to get it as high as possible. And again, that's very important from the buyer perspective because as we're negotiating the deal, that's kind of one of the key things that's used to negotiate the valuation.
Just really quickly. So, I think most of our listeners know about EBITDA. The difference between your EBITDA as it is on your books versus your adjusted EBITDA is doing these tweaks that you're talking about, finding those add backs, finding those one-off expenses,
That's right.
adjusting. Basically, you're adjusting everything to what it would look like post sale.
In a sense, yes. You're removing things that maybe are personal or tied to you owning the business. Great example is, well, my brother-in-law does the website and I pay him X dollars a year because it's my brother-in-law. Well, a buyer might not use your brother-in-law, and a buyer might say, we already have an in-house website person. So that would be a great example of something that we can take that expense and add it back or increase your adjusted EBITDA. And
Okay.
there's adjustments that can go both ways. There's some that might decrease your adjusted EBITDA, but hopefully we're finding more of the increase than decrease.
One of the biggest examples of one that we see all the time that we have to adjust it the other way is a veterinarian owner is not paying themselves
Correct.
industry standard, where a buyer, if they buy your practice, they're going to want to pay you industry
Yes.
standard. So that would be a negative adjustment on your
Yes.
value.
I mean, a minimum of 18, 19% of your production is what you should be paying yourself. If you're under that, we're going to have to gross it up.
Okay.
Take that as a
Okay.
hit.
So
Yep.
we have revenue, adjusted
Adjusted
EBITDA.
EBITDA. Yep.
What's the third one?
Third one, I would say, is kind of a combination, but looking at your payroll and production report. So payroll with the buyers mostly looking at one, they're looking at the cost of your labor, your lay staff, your DVMs, et cetera, and looking at that as a percentage of revenue because there's KPIs there that they want to look at and see where you're landing. But I would say if we go to the high level of what's most important, and I think the thing that I focus on the most is how much are you paying? We kind of just discussed it, but how much are you paying all of your DVMs, your associate DVMs yourself? And then how much are your DVMs producing? So a production report's going to show the production of revenue by DVM. And so that way they can start determining revenue each DVM is producing and prioritizing that. Obviously, they put them, sort them in order, highest to lowest producer. Then you look at your payroll according to that. And then you look at what is the percentage of production to pay so that you can make sure that we fall in that realm of 18, 22%, whatever it may be. typical standard range I would say we see is really it's like 20 to 22%. Pretty standard.
And another thing that I can add to when they're looking at the production and the payroll, you want to have your production somewhat diversified amongst your veterinarians. You don't want to have one of your veterinarians, for instance, producing like 75, 80%, because
Correct.
that introduces a huge risk to the buyer in the sense that if that veterinarian were to leave, 80%, 75% of the production is walking out the door.
Yeah.
And, and that'll give a buyer pause.
Yes, exactly. You want to have it pretty well balanced, and you don't want to have, just to reiterate, you don't want one owner or one DVM producing exponentially more, 2x more than everyone else. That just won't bode well. Creates issues.
Sure. Sure.
Um, I know you only asked me for three, but I think that there's one more that's newer-ish, and I think it's really important. As the market's kind of tightened up a little bit and or gotten more selective, we're really starting to focus a lot more now on looking at number of invoices or number of customers by month. And, we kind of talked about revenue early on. We're looking at number of invoices or number of customers by month and comparing them over 24 or 36 months. So you can look at June of 25 against June of 24. Were there more invoices, less invoices, or the same? Because your revenue could be growing and look better year over year because you're doing price increases even if you're losing customers. And what they want, they want the creme de la creme. They want both. So they want your customer counts increasing and your prices are increasing and your revenue's increasing. So they kind of want it all to be working together because if we break it down into simple accounting terminology, revenue equals price times quantity. They don't want to just see your price increasing, they want the quantity increasing as well. So that would be the fourth one.
Okay, and thank you I did not ask you for four, but I appreciate that fourth one because I know just by going through our process so many times it is important. And if I could just add one thing to the price increases, the buyers are not asking you to just jack up your prices to the point it becomes unaffordable
No.
for the people out there. That's not when we say price increases, that's not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about in that situation is uh, countless veterinarians have come to us where they are just not doing price increases over the course of time. Yet everything that they buy costs more money.
Yep.
And so this is also just about catching up and making sure that your prices fit the industry standard today. So this is not a way to you know, price gouge or anything like that. So that's
Right.
not what we're getting at. This is not about making veterinary care unaffordable. This is really about making sure that you have caught up for all of the price increases that probably should have happened, as inflation occurred over the
Yeah.
course of.
Well, and the only other thing I want to add before we end this one is there's over 100 things that they look at. You asked me for the top three. These are the top 3 to 4 main things. And it's like if you get a red flag in there, you're probably not quite ready to go to market. You want to make sure that you kind of have these 4 boxes checked because that leads you into the next 93 or 94 questions, whatever it may
Right.
be. Because there's a lot more that goes into it and a lot of extra other things that get looked at. But those are the big four.
Okay. Well, and thanks, Matt, for going through all of that. I know that we've had these conversations with our own clients. I know that this has been very helpful to them. So hopefully it's helpful to everybody that's watching today as well.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.